everybody. Welcome to our live knitting event. My name is Brenda KB Anderson, and normally you can find me over at the Creative Crochet Corner website. I do lots of tutorials over there for them. But today I get to teach knitting, and I'm very excited about that. I'm excited to show you my project that we're going to be walking through today. It's called the Coniferous Cable Mitts, and you can go ahead and download the free pattern. The download is in the description. And it's probably also in the chat as well, so you can go ahead and download that and you can follow along. But I'll be walking through the whole pattern with you guys today. There are going to be some rounds that I'm not going to be able to show you every single stitch, but I'm going to be walking you through so you know what to do all the way through your mitts. So don't worry about that. These mitts, here, let's take a look at these. So these are these cute little fingerless mitts. They're pretty quick to make. They're made with a worsted weight yarn. And then they have this beautiful pine tree cable on the back of the hand here. And if you are new to cables, that's okay, because I'm going to be showing you how to do all that. You don't need to worry about that. But they'd make a really great gift for someone, in the upcoming winter season. Or you can keep them for yourself. I really love fingerless mitts because they're so versatile and you still have the dexterity of your fingers. In the winter, because I live in Minnesota and it gets really cold, I layer up my fingerless mitts with like thinner gloves underneath so my hand stays warmer, but I can still kind of use my fingers a little bit. And then, for the warmer cold season that we have here, i.e. beginning of spring or late fall, I just wear them without the gloves underneath. So that just makes for a very versatile project. You could wear them for a longer time period too. So, all right, these mitts come in 3 different sizes. It's size for adults, size small, medium, and large. And let's see, I'll just take a peek here at the measurements. So let's see, around your hand circumference, if you measure just above where your thumb splits off, they measure 7.25 inches, 8 or 8.75, and they're quite stretchy. So just find the size that's closest to your hand circumference, measure your hand circumference above your thumb, and then you can figure out which size will fit you the best. All right, so let's talk a little bit about materials. But before that, of course, I just want to mention, of course, as you guys know, this is a live event. So if you guys have questions, you want me to go over anything, if anything wasn't clear, or if you guys have suggestions for me or suggestions, for people in general working on these mitts, please put those in the chat. I love to see you guys in there. If you want to just say hi, tell me, what knit project you're working on. Tell me what kind of knit projects you want to make in the future. If you're interested in other live tutorials, anything like that can go in the chat. All right. Okay, so let's talk about materials. So we're going to be needing 2 skeins of yarn, no matter what size you're making. Actually, I'll just take another peek in here and let you know how much we really need. So 140 or 158 or 175 yards, just depending on the size that you're making. And all of this information, all the little details and everything is in your download. It's a full pattern. It's got all the instructions. It has the exact, like the brand of yarn, the color that I use. Everything you need to know is in your pattern. And I'll kind of be referring to your pattern, or to the pattern as we go through this process. But you are definitely going to need that if you want to make these mitts, unless you're really, really good at memorizing things like a chart. All right, so let's see here. Okay, so you're going to need your yarn, you're going to need your knitting needles, of course, and we're going to be using double point needles today. And so you'll need a set of 4, and I am using a size US 6, which is 4mm knitting needles throughout this project. So let's see. Oh, and then you're going to need a couple of stitch markers. If you'd like to mark the beginning of your round, I know some people like to do that. Usually I just let my yarn tail tell me where the beginning of my round is, but I'll talk a little bit about that later. Then you're going to need a removable stitch marker or a locking stitch marker, and then you'll need another stitch marker later for helping you remember where to make your thumb gusset as we begin working on that part of the mittens. And you will need also a cable needle. And if you're newer to this and you don't have a cable needle, that's okay, because I'm going to show you what I have used many times in the past when I didn't feel like getting my cable needle out of my bag, or I forgot it, or I lost it. Lots of reasons, but I'll show you my quick fix for that. And it's completely fine if you don't have a cable needle. You can definitely make these without a cable needle. So, all right. Okay, so let's get started. I am going to start out with the German twisted cast on. That is how I like to begin a lot of my projects, especially if they need to be a little bit stretchy, wherever you're casting on. So I'm going to estimate about a little over a yard, maybe a yard and a half, just to be on the safe side for a yarn tail. You're going to leave that and then make a slip knot and place that on your needle. I'm going to use this as a darker background here so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so we've got, this is the strand connected to the ball. This is the strand of about a yard and a half, just kind of hanging off here for a longer tail. And I'm going to place both strands in my hand like this, and then put my thumb and my finger through to make a little window here like that, okay? So I'm going to take, and by the way, you don't have to use this cast on. You can use whatever stretchy cast on you feel like using. It's totally fine. I just wanted to show you this in case you've never done this cast on before and you're interested in trying it. Okay, so we are going to take our knitting needle and we're going to go underneath both of these strands over here on this side. Then we're going to go down through the top of that opening like that. Then we're going to come across to over on top of this strand here, and we're going to grab that with our needle and pull it through that little triangle right there. And as we pull it through, we can release our thumb, and then I'm using my thumb to pull on this strand and tighten it up. So we'll do that a few more times. So I'm going to go underneath both strands, around and down through the middle, and then over to the other side. I'm going to grab that yarn, pull it through, release my thumb, and tighten it up. So underneath two, down through the middle, across the top, bring that through the tiny triangle, and there we go. So sometimes this is a little bit tricky to get when you first start to grab that and pull it through that tiny triangle. So if you're having trouble with that, you can release that triangle by bending your thumb down, and it makes a larger hole to get your needle through. So that's an option for you as well. So that would be, whoops. So when you come across here and grab that yarn, you can do that and pull your needle through if that makes things easier. Okay, so I'm going to be casting on, okay, so when you do this, if you've never cast onto double point needles before, you can cast all of your stitches for this project. You could cast them all onto one needle. You could cast them onto a longer needle or a cable needle. You could, a circular needle. You could, there's lots of different ways to do this. I want to show you the way that I do it, just in case there might be some of you who find this interesting. This is maybe a little bit unusual. So I cast on all of my stitches that I want to have on my first needle. Okay, so I cast them onto the first needle, and that, in my case, because I'm making the smallest size, I've got 21 stitches cast on here. And then I'm going to add 2 more stitches. So these 2 stitches are really going to end up on the next needle, on the second needle. So there's 1 more, so we have 22 and 23. And then I take my next needle and I just grab those 2 stitches off of it like this. And then I just kind of let this needle with the stitches hang below where I'm working. And then I continue casting on my stitches to my next needle here. So I've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So this would be how many stitches I need on my second needle. This is all specified in the pattern. I'm making the smallest size, so I'm casting on 11 stitches here. Then I'm going to add 2 more stitches because those stitches are going to go onto the third needle. So there's 1 and 2. And like I said before, you definitely do not need to do it this way. I just do it this way because I don't really like transferring my stitches over for some reason. It just kind of, I don't know, it's just not a fun process for me. And so I do just transferring those 2 over, and that kind of gets me started on the next needle. And then I can cast onto that needle. So the last needle, I've got 10 stitches that I need to cast on. So I've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This yarn is a little bit sticky. It's actually stickier than the other colors I was using, which is interesting. But that's why I'm having a little bit of trouble. There we go. 8, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I need to do 2 more. 1 and 2. There we go. Okay, I'm going to break this yarn because it's just going to get in my way. So then once you have all your stitches cast on, you can arrange them into sort of a lopsided triangle like this, placing those yarn tails over here. And you want to make sure you're not twisting your stitches, so you just look for all those little kind of diagonal lines, making sure they're kind of pointing. I like to have them pointing kind of up and towards the middle there. Then I'm going to grab my 4th knitting needle, and let's see, let me separate these 2 so they don't get all tangled. Okay, so then I'm going to bring this yarn tail underneath this needle, and then I'm going to turn everything in this direction. So we have that yarn tail sitting on top, and nothing is twisted. There we go. And now I can go ahead and just start knitting right here. So I've got my yarn tail connected to the ball right there, and I'm going to start knitting here. So in this pattern, as I'm working, I'm going to be doing a knit, purl, you know, 1x1 ribbing. But when I make my knit stitches, I'm knitting them through the back loop. So that way I twist each knit stitch, and it makes for a very elastic ribbing. It's really nice. It springs back much better than just a regular 1x1, so that's why I'm choosing that. So instead of working my knit stitch here through the regular way, through the front of the front loop, or the front of the loop, rather, front leg, I'm going to go through the back leg here. So I'm going to just insert my needle here, and then make a knit stitch. And then I'm going to purl the next stitch right here. And knit through the back loop and purl here. So I'm just going to do knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl all the way around. So on my first needle, I've got 21 stitches. My second needle, I've got 11. And my third needle, I have 10. So that will be different for the different sizes. You'll just have to look for that in the pattern. But the reason, you may be wondering why I divided it up so weirdly, and the reason that I did that was because I like to have all of the stitches that I'm going to be using for working across the cable panel. I like to have that all on one needle, which is the first needle of the round. So. Okay. So we're nearing the end of that first needle. We should be ending with a knit stitch because it's an odd number of stitches and we started with a knit stitch. So that's just one little tip there. It's best, of course, to count up your stitches before you do this. All right, so we ended with a knit stitch there. Got our first 21 stitches. And now we're going to move to the next needle and continuing in the pattern. Go. So when I'm doing this, when I'm twisting those knit stitches, it can be kind of easy to flip-flop and default back to the regular knit stitch and not even realize that you're doing that, especially after you stop paying attention for the first few stitches. But if you keep in mind that every time your needle enters the stitch, you're always going to be inserting it in like from the right to the left. Here, I'll show you just a second here. Okay, so we're always going to be going in this direction. Normally when we do a knit stitch we go in this direction, but we're going in this direction for that twisted knit. And then when we switch to the purl, we're also going in that direction as well. So it just is a matter of where we're holding the yarn or where we're wrapping the yarn around, whether it's pulled in the front like a purl stitch or in the back like a knit stitch. All right, we've almost made it here. And we're ending with that purl stitch. And that is the end of our round. And so if you want to, you can place a stitch marker, in that first stitch of the round to help remind you. I usually just let my yarn tail tell me that that's the beginning of my round. And then you're just going to continue working in that 1 by 1 rib pattern that we already established. So we're going knitting through the back loop and then purling the next stitch, knitting through the back loop, purling the next stitch, knitting through the back loop, and so on, around and around. So we're going to go around 15 times, and your piece will look like this after you do that. So it's very, very stretchy, very elastic. It really bounces back. I really like twisting those stitches because it keeps everything, nice and warm. not a lot of holes between your stitches like sometimes can happen in those 1 by 1 ribbings. So let me move this out of the way. All right, so now at this point, after we finish the cuff, we are going to do our setup round. So here again, this is our 21 stitches here, our 11 and our 10. So we are going to start, let me just pull up the pattern here. Oh, I want to mention too, the cable section is fully charted right here. If you are a chart person, I am definitely a chart person, so I'm going to be teaching from this. Your little key is down here as to what all these symbols mean. But if you're not a chart person, the whole cable section has been written out here. It says cable stitch pattern, worked over 21 stitches, so that's these 21 stitches here. So this is just the written form of what we can see in that cable chart. And then above that, we have explanations on how to do all the different cables, which I'll be showing you guys as well, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew that that was all in your pattern there. Okay. So we are going to be doing the setup round for the body of the mitt. So let me just open this up here. So for my size, I'm going to knit across, 21 stitches. So you're going to be knitting across all the stitches on that first needle. So knitting every stitch, and we are not going through the back loop now. We're just doing regular knit stitches all the way across. Looks like we have some hellos. People are saying where they're watching from. We've got Mary from the Boston area, and Monica from Winnipeg, and Jeanette from California, South Carolina in the house, whoop whoop, and Barbara from Maine, Pashmina Studio viewing from the Himalayan capital, Kathmandu, Nepal. Wow, okay. Thank you guys so much for popping in and saying hi, and wow. That's awesome. We're coming from all over the place. I love that. Okay, so here I have knit across my first needle. This is the setup round in the body of the mitt right here. So I've knit across everything on the first needle, and then we're going to knit 2 stitches on the second needle. So 1 and 2. Then we're going to place a stitch marker. You could use a regular stitch marker. It does not have to be a locking stitch marker like this one, but this is just what I have. So you're going to place a stitch marker after you've knit those 2 stitches, and then you are going to, let me just check here. Yep, so, and then you're going to knit the rest of the stitches on your needle. So I've got 9 here for my size. It'll be 9, 10, or 11, depending on what size you're making. So we're just knitting across all those stitches, and then we're going to knit across the last needle as well, the 3rd needle. So one good thing about having your stitches split up so unevenly like this, it's very easy to tell where the beginning of your round is, where that cable panel is, because it's like twice as wide as the amount of stitches on either of the other needles. So that just kind of helps orient you a little bit until you start getting your pattern going. And it's very obvious. Okay, so now we're going to do round 1. So we're going to work that across the cable pattern. Actually, so let me point out, if you are making the medium or the large, you're going to have a stitch or 2 stitches before you work the cable pattern, just depending on the size you're working in, and then you'll have a stitch or 2 stitches after the cable pattern on that first needle, okay? So I'm working the smallest size, so I'm not going to be working an extra 1 or 2 knit stitches before I get to my cable panel. This is just my cable panel right here. So we're going to be following the first round of that, so I'll turn it over so you guys can see. So we're going to be working right here, so you can see that there are 9 purl stitches, those are the little dots, and then there's 3 knit stitches and 9 purl stitches. So I'm bringing my yarn to the front so I can do those purl stitches. So we have 9 to do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we are going to knit 3. This is going to be the trunk of our tree here. So 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to purl 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There we go. So we've worked across the very first round of our cable pattern, and then we are going to start our increases for our thumb gusset here. So if you take a look at, let's see, where are we? Here we are. So round number 1, we've knit across that first needle, and then we're going to knit either 1, 2, or 3, just depending on how many stitches you have, or what size you're making, sorry. So I'm knitting just 1, and basically you're stopping when there's 1 stitch left before your stitch marker. Then we're going to knit in the front. So we're going to knit like a regular knit and don't drop it off yet, and then you're going to knit in the back of the loop as well. So knit front back. That's an increase there, and we're going to slip our needle. We're going to do 1 knit stitch, and then we're going to knit front and then back to increase right there, and then we're going to continue making knit stitches across the rest of our stitches for the round. So that was our first set of increases for the thumb gusset, and we're going to be increasing on every other round. So not every round gets increases. Every time we do the increases, you're going to be doing 2 increases, 1 before, on the stitch before the stitch marker, and then 1 a stitch after the stitch marker, like 2 stitches after, I should say. I'll show you that again when we come around. I know that wasn't the most clearly put. Okay, so we're just knitting to the end of that round after we did those increases. Now we're working round number 2 of the cable, or of the cable pattern. So it's exactly the same as round number 1. So we're going to do those same 9 purls, 3 knits, 9 purls. So, and if you were working the larger sizes, you would be, before you start this cable pattern, just remember, you've got a stitch or 2 stitches, depending on the size, before and a stitch or 2 stitches after that cable pattern. So don't forget that. I just don't have those because this is the smallest size here. But it's all specified in your pattern. I just wanted to make it a little easier to understand. Just explaining it. That's the magic of video. Wow, we have a whole bunch of people saying hi again here. That's amazing. Whoa. I missed a lot of this. Hi from Yelm, Washington, and someone's from Istanbul. Wow, thank you so much for saying hi. Good morning from Georgia. And Monica says she's nervous about knitting cables, so I'm here to witness the magic happen. Excellent. Well, I have to tell you, Monica, I'm a little bit nervous about teaching this today just because this is my very first live knitting project ever that I've ever done. So we can be buddies. You can do okay on your knitting cable, and I will do okay getting through this, right? Okay, Janice is from Eshowe, South Africa. I'm sorry if I said all that wrong. And Lori is saying hi from Rochester. Thanks you guys so much for saying hi. Okay, so I've knit across those 9. I purled across those 9. So we had 9 purls, 3 knits, 9 purls. This is round number 2 of our cable pattern. And then remember how I said we were only increasing on every other round? So this is the next round after an increased round. So we are just going to knit all of the stitches to the end. And slip that marker when you get to it. All right, here's our 3rd needle. We're just continuing to knit to the very end of our round. There we go. So if you are working the medium size or the large size, you are going to repeat those 2 rounds that we just did. So that would be round number 1 and round number 2 of your chart. Let's see here. I just want to show you where that's at here. So if you are working, I should mention, I do need to make a little correction. This before had an M and then a slash and an L, and technically it should be an M and then an L in brackets to show you that those are the 2 different sizes, and the large information is found in the brackets. So I will get that updated later. It's just a minor thing, but I just wanted to call that out in case you were wondering what was going on there. This only pertains to size medium and large, not to the smallest size that I'm working on, but you're going to repeat rounds 1 and 2 either 1 more time for a size medium or 2 more times for a size large. And so what this is going to mean for those of you who are working the larger sizes is that the number that is on the side of your chart right here, these numbers here, those tell you what round you're on. However, if you're working a medium or large, you are going to be adding either 2 rounds or 4 rounds to the round number compared to what this number is. So for example, as you're working along and you're like, ooh, I don't know where I'm at, what round am I on? And you're working and you just worked, say you just worked across this row here on your piece. If you were working a size medium, instead of being at round number 8, you'd be at round number 10. Or if you're working a large, you'd be at round number 12. This is also explained in your pattern in case you need to reread that. But I just want to make sure that you know, because you're adding those 2 extra rounds here for a size medium and those 4 extra rounds really for a size large, you're going to end up with, of course, more rounds to work because you need to make a longer mitt. So these numbers on the side of your chart are not going to correspond to the numbers that you can find, like if you were looking here and you knew you were on round number 30 and you were doing the medium, that would mean when you look at the chart, you are actually going to be following across round number 28 instructions when it says 30 for the medium size. I hope that makes sense. Or if you were doing the largest size, if you were working across number 32, you'd really be working around number 28, okay? Because, and actually, for this round that's written here, these are exactly the same instructions across the chart, no matter what size you're working on. It's just that you've previously worked some extra rows to make your mitt a little longer. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so now we are working round number 3. Oops, where's my chart? Here we go. Round number 3, which is exactly the same on this chart. And we're going to purl those 9. So no matter what size you're working on, after you've done those repeats, you're going to, the next round you're going to work is across the round number 3 of your chart. Okay, I've worked 9 purls, 3 knits, and then we'll do 9 purls. And then the next round gets exciting with the cables. So Monique, hang on. Let's see, was it Monique who mentioned that? Oh, Monica. It was Monica who said they were nervous about the cables. Oh, and Monique is saying, thanks for this, just logging on now. Hi, Monique. Glad you're here. Okay. All right, now, because it is an odd number, that means we are going to be doing an increase over here for the thumb. So we're going to knit across the second needle here until we get to 1 stitch before our marker. So there's a marker, there's that last stitch, and then we're going to knit through the front and then knit through the back before we pull that stitch off. That's our increase. Slip the marker, make 1 knit stitch, and then we're going to knit through the front and then knit through the back of the next stitch. And then continue our way across, knitting all the stitches to the end. So this is a great little project if you're newer to doing cables. The cable is fairly straightforward, and also this is a very small project and you're just making 1 mitt at a time. So if you make a mistake somewhere and you have to ravel back, it's just a small piece. It's not such a big deal as if you were making a larger, like a cowl or hat or a sweater or something like that. So this is a good thing to learn on. Okay, so now we're going to be working across row number 4 or round number 4 of the chart. So here we are at the beginning. We're going to start off with 2 purl stitches. 1 and 2. And then we are going to make this. Okay, so here's the symbol here, and if you look down here, it corresponds to 2 by 2 LC. So this is a left, that means 2 by 2, that means 2 stitches crossing over 2 stitches, and it's a left cable cross, or left crossing cable. So that means it goes in this direction. So in order to do that, you are going to take your cable needle, and you're going to place your needle underneath the next 2 stitches, just like that, and pull them right off. And just let them hang out on the front of your work. And then you're going to go ahead and knit the next 2 stitches. Just ignoring that cable needle for now, like that. And then you're going to pull these needles over to the side and you're going to knit those. Now, some people, most people probably, like to knit right off of their cable needle. I find that that's a tricky thing to do, especially if you're newer to this. So I just place my stitches right back onto the needle that they came from, so onto the left-hand needle, and then knit off of that. I just feel like it's just easier for me to hang on to that. It actually takes me less time to do that than to knit off of my cable needle because I'm not very good at that. I just knit, I tried and I thought, why am I doing this? There's a way that I could do this that's simpler for me. And so I just always dump them back onto my needle and then knit or whatever it is that I need to do off of my needle. Very, very seldom do I actually knit off of my cable needle. Okay, so then I purl the next 3 stitches because we have 3 little purl bumps here. Then we have 3 knit stitches, 1, 2, 3. And then we've got 3 purl bumps here. So 1 purl, purl, purl. And now we've made it to this symbol here. And so that's a 2x2 right cross. So 2/2 RC. So that means it's slanting in the opposite direction. So again, we're going to take the next 2 stitches off of our needle. So 1 and 2, I'm just slipping them onto my cable needle. And then I'm going to let that just hang out behind my work back here. It's just hanging out, not doing anything. And then I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches. Knit, knit. And then I'm going to put those back onto my needle so I can knit both of these. You can, if you want to, just take that cable needle and knit directly off the cable needle, especially if you have like a straighter cable needle. I like to use this one because I like to flip it out of the way and let it hang down, and it really seems like it's not in my way as much. But you know, there's all different kinds of cable needles. So now I'm just knitting those 2 stitches. And then I'm going to finish up my cable pattern here by doing 2 purls at the end of that chart, okay? So I know it doesn't look like much yet, but on the next couple of rounds, you'll start to see the twisting that's happening here. Okay, and so now that was an even number, so we are not going to be increasing. We're just going to be knitting all the way across to the end. And remember to slip the marker, and we'll knit to the end here. All right, so this next round is fairly uneventful. Basically what we're just doing is we're just purling the purls and knitting the knits. So we have 2 purls at the beginning of our chart here. So we're here on round number 5. So we've got 2 purls, 4 knits. So there's our first purl, second purl, and then here's our 4 knits. These are a little tighter because they, had to stretch because we switched the order in which we knit those stitches. So you'll feel that. So there's our 4 knit stitches. Then we're going to purl 3. 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to knit 3. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to purl 3. 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to knit across those 4 that we had cabled on the last round. So here's 2, 3, 4, and then purl the last 2, 1 and 2, just like that. And then we're going to do our increase on this round because this is an odd numbered round. So we're going to do an increase. So here we are. Knitting you just knit all the stitches until there's 1 left before the marker. Then we're going to knit front and back and then pull that stitch off, slip our marker, knit 1, and then we're going to knit front and back like that, and then we're going to knit to the end. Alrighty. I'm going to show you, on the next round, I'm going to show you those 2 cables that we already did, or those, the 2x2 LC, 2x2 RC cables. I'll show you those once more, and then I'll talk you through a little bit, just so that we can skip ahead a little bit. But don't worry, I'm going to be showing you all the different stitches that you need to know, so don't worry. Okay, so here we are at round number 6 of our chart. So we're going to do 2 purls. So 1, 2, and then, let me see, where are we? Okay, so 2 purls, and then we're going to do that left leaning cable again. So every time you do that, the 2x2 LC, you're going to take the next 2 stitches off, let it hang to the front. So if you remember, before you get to the trunk of the tree, which is right here, those 3 knit stitches, these stitches on this side, they're always going to be leaning in that direction. See, if you take a look at the chart, they're all going in that direction. So that means you're always going to be holding those stitches to the front while you knit the next couple stitches, and then you will, knit the ones from your cable needle. Or if you're like me, you'll just pop them back over onto your left-hand needle so that you can knit them. All right. And then we have that, let's see, 1, 2, oh, you know what? I just realized I didn't do these 2 knit stitches. That's how I got confused. I just did my cable right away. Okay, so we're going to unknit a couple stitches here. That's a good lesson in paying attention to your chart. All right, so and if you have to undo your cables, so you can just kind of reverse everything. So I just unknit those 2 stitches. I'm going to place those stitches back, hang them to the front. I'm going to unknit these 2 stitches, just like that. And then we're going to knit the 2 stitches that we put on the cable needle. So I'm popping them back over to the left-hand needle here. And then I'm going to knit those 2. Okay, so I should have, once I did those 2 purl stitches, I should have knit 2 stitches before I got excited and I did my cable again. I just wasn't paying attention to my chart. Okay, so again, if you're doing those left-leaning cables, you're going to pull 2 stitches off, hang them out to the front, and then knit the next 2. And you're going to take those stitches, pop them back over to the left-hand needle, and then knit them, both of them. And then you can purl 1, and then we've gotten to the trunk of the tree, so we're knitting 3, 1, 2, 3, and we're going to purl 1, and then we're going to do our right-leaning cable. So when you get to those right-leaning cables on the, once you get past the tree trunk, you're going to hold those to the back, and then knit 2, and then you're going to knit 2 from your cable needle. So I'm just going to slide them back over, just slipping them over onto my needle so I can go ahead and knit them. There they are. And then I have 2 knit stitches here, 1, 2, and then ending up with the 2 purls at the very end of that round of the chart there. Okay, so now you can see they're actually kind of leaning toward each other. They're leaning toward that tree trunk right there. So you can actually see our cables starting to form. So I'm going to talk you through the next couple of rounds because they're very, very similar. So once you work around round number 6, you just work your way around, knitting all the knits after you work across that chart. On round 7, you're going to do 2 purls. You're going to do 6 knits, 1 purl, make that tree trunk, those 3 knit stitches, 1 purl, 6 knits, 2 purls, and then you are going to make sure you do your increase when you get to your thumb, so exactly how we've been working that. On the next round, you can see here it's very similar, so these are your knits and your cable is further over. We're no longer going to be working those 3 knits for the trunk. Instead, we're going to be making a purl right in the middle. And what that does is it creates this little kind of groove between your stitches that come together. See how the trunk looks like it disappears underneath the branches there? That's what's starting to happen there. But there are no new stitches here. You're just working, you're just working all the things that we have already talked about, the same kind of cables here. You're just putting, knits and purls in different places. All right, so then after that, you will be doing, the next round, you'll be doing 2 purls, a bunch of knits. So that's, let's see, 4 knits, a purl. Sorry, that's a 4, obviously, it's 8. 2 purls, 8 knits, 1 purl, 8 knits, and 2 purls. And then because that's an odd round, you're going to be doing your increase there at your thumb gusset. And then that brings us up to round number 10, which I want to show you because here we have a new symbol in our chart. So this is what that looks like. Here we go. We're going to be doing 2 purls here to start off. That's nothing new. So 1 and 2. And then this symbol right here is a left purl cross. So and it's a 2x2 cable, just like we've been doing, but instead of knitting both groups, we're going to be purling the first set that we actually work. So because it's a left crossing cable, we're taking off 2 stitches, we're going to bring them to the front because it's left crossing, and then we are going to purl the next 2 stitches. So purl and purl, like that. Then we're going to knit the next 2 stitches off of our needle. So you can go ahead and knit those on from your cable needle, or if you're like me, just dump them off onto the left-hand needle so that you can knit them. There we go. And then we are going to knit 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to purl 1 right there. That's right above the center of that tree trunk. That's creating that little groove that I showed you earlier. And then we're going to knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to do a 2x2 right purl cable. Okay, so what that means is we're going to take off the next 2 stitches and we're going to hang them to the back because this is a right leaning cable. And then we are going to knit the next 2 stitches. So you have to think about, before we did the purls first, but that's because whatever stitches land on the outside of the cable, like on either side, those are going to be the purl stitches. All right, so now we're going to bring this cable needle back. You can either knit right off your cable needle or transfer them like I did. And then you're going to purl those 2 stitches, okay, because they're on the outside now. There we go, purl and purl. And then we're going to end with those last 2 purls of the chart. Just like that, okay? So now you can see those purl stitches that we did, they're right here and they're right here. So that's making, when the cable kind of goes in towards the middle, it's kind of filling up the outer space with more purls now at this point. Okay, so that's what's happening there. And then I'm going to talk you through some of this section here because it's very similar to what we've already been doing. You're just going to, instead of having only 2 purl stitches when you start off, you're going to have 4. And then you're going to work all the way across and just that you have a different amount of purl stitches here, different amount of knit stitches. These are the same cables that we've already worked down here. These are the same ones we've already worked over here. You'll have differing, and then in between you're going to have a couple of rounds where you're just knitting the knits and purling the purls and that sort of thing. And throughout this entire section, you are going to be increasing on those odd rounds. Okay, so not the even ones, just the odd ones, and you're increasing where your thumb gusset is. And then in round number 17, you are going to remove that stitch marker from the thumb area. So you're just going to be taking that out as you work number 17. You're not actually, that's the first round where you're not going to be increasing on an odd round. Okay, so that's where we stop doing our increases for the gusset. Then we work a few more rounds even just to kind of build up that thumb before we separate the thumb from the rest of the hand. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So here we have, sorry, I know it changed colors, but this is what we have so far, okay? So we're all the way up to, we're about to work round number 21. And this is where we're going to divide for the thumb. Okay, so we're going to continue working across our chart. So no matter what size you're making, doesn't matter what size you're making, when you are working this round of the chart here, round number 21 of the chart, that is where you're dividing for the thumb. So this will actually be round number 23 or round number 25 of your mitten, because remember how I said the round numbers no longer match up for the medium and the large. You just have to add 2 or add 4 rounds depending on what size you're doing. But when you're working across this round in the chart, that is where you're going to be dividing for your thumb no matter what size you're working. Okay, so we're going to do 4 purls. Whoops, snagged my yarn a little bit there. So 1, 2, 3, 4 purls. And then we're going to knit across 6 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're going to make that purl at the center of our chart. Knit across 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we're going to do 4 purls for the end of our chart. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, and now we've gotten to our next needle. So I'm going to take a look at the instructions here for dividing for the thumb. Okay, so after we worked across the first needle, then we are going to knit either 3 stitches, 4 stitches, or 5 stitches, depending on the size you're working. So I'm knitting 3, 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to put the next either 16, 18, or 20 stitches on waste yarn or on a stitch holder for now. So I like to use this, this is my favorite thing to use. It's just a hemp cord. I like it because it's stiff and it doesn't get stuck in my yarn, but it has enough grip that doesn't slide around either. I like this better than a metal stitch holder just because it's so flexible. So I'm going to be placing the next 16 stitches onto my twine here, but you can put it on a stitch holder or however you like to do it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And I just kind of let that hang out like that. All right, I'm going to come back over here to the last 3 stitches that I worked, and I'm going to bring that right up next to the following stitch after all the stitches that I put on my stitch holder or my twine or whatever you're using. And then I'm going to go ahead and knit to the end of my round here. So I like to pull that nice and tight. When I do that very first stitch, make sure you're pulling that nice and tight so you don't have a big long loop there. It's easy to do. All right, and then I will knit the next section. To the end, just like that. And so that's how you separate for your thumb. You separate the thumb from the hand, and now you're just going to be knitting the hand of your mitten. Okay, so going around and around and around. So I do want to mention that making the right mitten and making the left mitten is exactly the same process. The only difference is when we're doing that setup round. Remember when the very first time we placed that stitch marker in here to start marking out where we're going to be putting our increases, instead of placing it here, you're going to be placing it over here so that you have mittens that mirror each other. But that is the only difference. So when you put that stitch marker in, and then the pattern will tell you to knit up to the stitch before the stitch marker and then make your increase and then slip your marker and then you make your increase after that as well to mirror the other increase. So that section of the pattern, it's still going to remain true even though your stitch marker is over here. You're just going to have farther to knit before you get to your stitch marker, and that's where you're going to be making your thumb gusset for the opposite hand. So this is the right hand. You're going to be making the left hand exactly the same way, setting aside your stitches for the thumb exactly the same way. It's just going to be over here. Okay, so let's see here. The next thing I wanted to show you guys, well, let's go back to our chart and take a look at the next couple of rounds here. So on the next round, after we divided for the thumb, well, actually, maybe I'll just show you the first cable here, just as a little refresher. So we're going to be doing 4 purls here. 1, 2, 3, 4, And then you're going to be doing that 2x2 left purl cable here. So you would take those off, place them in the front, and then you're going to purl the next 2 stitches, 1 and 2, and then you can knit the 2 stitches that are on your cable needle. So I'm just going to slip them back onto that needle to make it a little easier for me, and knit those 2. Okay, so you can see it's making the cable go in that direction, and you end up with even more purl stitches on the outside of your cable here. So then as you work, you can see, and then on the other side, it's the opposite. You know, I showed you that cable right down here. It's the exact same thing. And then, yeah, there's really nothing new for a while, because this is just purling the same cable we've been working on this side, same one on this side. You know, a couple rounds in between where you're just purling the purls and knitting the knits. And then we're going to get to round number 28 of our chart. And let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so this is what it looks like so far. You can see I've got a left hand here. As I explained before, we're making our gusset on that side. So you can just see what that looks like. But from the point where you set the thumb aside, the right and the left hand are identical. It's the same all the way to the finish there. So. Okay, so on round number 28, we're going to be purling 6 purls. Doing 6 purls here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we're going to do that left purl cable, 2x2 left crossing purl cable. So we're going to pull those stitches to the front. We're going to purl the next 2 stitches, 1 and 2. And then we're going to place those stitches back on our left hand needle, or you can just knit right off your cable needle. And then we're going to purl right here at the center of our cable. And then we're going to take the next 2 stitches off. And because this is a right leaning cable, we're going to put them behind. And then we're going to knit the next 2 stitches because we're still in the interior of our cable here. And then now these 2 stitches are going to become, they're going over to the outside of the cable, and they're going to become purl stitches here. 1 and 2. Okay, and then we're going to do some more purls to the end of our chart. And then we're going to knit all the way around the back of the hand. And then I will show you on the next round how to do the 2 decreases that we're going to be working on here. There's just 2 decreases and that's it. Oh, looks like I'm missing some questions here. Let me just catch up with you guys. Do you prefer double point needles over magic loop? You know, it depends what kind of yarn that I'm working with usually. That's a good question. And like how tightly I'm working something. If this is knit at a very tight gauge, because I really like my fingerless mittens to be warm and to not get all stretched out. I just like mittens in general to be knit, and socks also to be knit at a very tight gauge, so that way they kind of keep their shape a little better. So when I knit something at a tight gauge, then I have no problem using the double point needles, but you could certainly use the magic loop if you're a fan of the magic loop. That would of course work great. You know, I think it just depends. I mean, obviously it just depends on what you like the most, and then, you know, the kind of surfaces that you're working with, like how slippery things are. If you know, I think that's the main reason that people get sick of double point needles, because things start slipping off and you got all these things to manage. But for this project, I find it easy enough on the double point needles, and I don't have to keep, you know, pulling the loop around. So I prefer the double point needles for this, but that's, you know, maybe you're more of a magic loop person. Pamela's saying good morning from Michigan, and she loves cable knitting. Awesome. And we have a good morning from Northwest Indiana, and hello from Woodstock. And I can make these like hotcakes once I learn, says Jeanette. Awesome. Yeah, they're pretty quick. Andrea says, hi Brenda, I always have a problem with determining how much yarn I need for the long tail cast on. Do you have any suggestions on how to do that? Actually, there's a video on the Knitting Circle that talks about that. So I would recommend checking that out just because we're a little short on time. Jeanette is, oh, she likes the website. Awesome. Wow, I'm really behind on the comments, you guys. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize there were more coming in. Highlighter tape helps you keep your place on the chart. Yes, Lori, I should have been doing that. I also have a chart keeper with a magnet and everything, and I just didn't bring that today. I love that thing too. That's a really, or sticky notes above. Always block out what's coming so that way you can see where you've been. You don't need to see where you're going. Oh, and Monique says she puts a ruler above the row on the chart to keep her place. Yes, that's an awesome suggestion. And Monica says her nervousness has been cured. Oh, thank you very much, Monica. Thanks for the compliment. Okay. All right, awesome. So here's round number 29. We're going to start out with our pearls. So we're going to purl, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 pearls here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pearls. And now we are going to be doing a slip, slip, knit, decrease. Okay, so that's right here. Just to remind you, you can always check down here for what those things mean. So the slip, slip, knit, decrease, that means we're slipping the stitches one at a time. So we're slipping this one, slipping both of them knitwise there. And then we're going to go ahead and put the left-hand needle through those two and then knit them together like that through the back loop. And then we're going to purl one because we're at the center of our cable here. And then the next decrease we're going to do is knit 2 together. So that just means we come on over here. So here's our first stitch, second stitch, we come on over here and we go through both stitches from left to right and then knit those 2 together. Just like that, pull them off the needle, and that has decreased our stitch count a little bit, which is good because the cables kind of take up a little bit of the space when things are crossing, and then when that stops happening, it gets a little wider, and I don't like that, especially on the end of my fingerless mittens. I like them to be very snug around my fingertips. Oh, and Dawn says the design is lovely. Thank you, Dawn. Good to see you in here. Okay. All right, so then I just purled across the rest of that, that cable panel there. All right, so on the next, I just want to point out here on the chart, because this is confusing to some people, these darker squares, they mean that that's just kind of a placeholder in the chart, but it doesn't, you don't do anything when you get to that square, because we just did a decrease that took up 2 stitches into 1. So this is just kind of giving you a little placeholder so you can just ignore that when you get to it. Like for example, on the next round, you just purl across here, do a knit stitch, ignore that stitch, and then you do another purl stitch, ignore that, because that's not even a stitch. I shouldn't have said ignore that stitch. Just ignore that block, and then you do a knit, and then a bunch of purls. It's just a way of filling in the chart so that it just kind of keeps its place. That's all. It doesn't mean you don't do any stitches there, just to explain that. Okay, so then you just continue working your way through the chart here. And then you're going to switch back to this 1x1 rib pattern that we already went through. And then you can bind off your stitches and bind them off in the pattern. So what that means is when you're doing your bind off, it's going to be like you're still knitting through the back loop while you're doing your bind off, if that makes sense. If you need extra help, there's more help on the Knitting Circle for that. You can check that out for binding off in a pattern. You can look that up. And also, then of course, the last thing you're going to do is you're going to place all of these back onto your double point needles. I'm going to do that real quick because we're running out of time here. And then you can go ahead and finish up your thumb. And the thumb is just made exactly in that, that same 1x1 ribbing pattern with the twisted knit stitches as everything else. So you're just, and it doesn't matter, at this point, it doesn't matter how many stitches you have on each needle. Really, the only reason that I specify that in this pattern, I don't normally do that, but the only reason I specified it in this pattern was to make it just easier for you to see where that cable section is and to be able to work that whole cable section on one needle. It makes it a little bit easier, and it also looks a little better, I feel like, if you can work it all the way across one needle, because you don't have, sometimes you get those sort of ladders. Even though there are lots of things you can do to reduce those stitches from stretching out. If you don't know what I mean, what I'm talking about is just when you have a bunch of double point needles, sometimes you get those sort of stretched out areas between where one needle ends and the next needle begins. But you just have to, pull on those a little bit to keep them tighter. But I didn't want that to happen in the middle of anybody's cable pattern. All right, so we got a lot of needles going on here, because you should really be binding this off before you start doing this craziness. But I just wanted to show you how to place them back on. And then you just grab a new piece of yarn. Let me take this here. And I always start right at that intersection between the thumb and the hand, because that way I can leave myself a nice long yarn tail, and you can use that to kind of close that little gap, that little hole. There's always a little tiny hole between where the thumb and the hand split. So just a reminder, you're going to be knitting through the back loop, and then you'll purl a stitch, and then you'll be knitting through the back loop, just like that, and then you'll purl. So you'll just do that all the way around your thumb. Just, getting those stitches going again here. And then you'll switch to the next, and you'll do that for a few rounds. I think, let me just check here. Yep, so it's really only 4 rounds of that ribbing pattern, and then you just bind off. And that's it. Okay, and then like I said before, the left mitt is made exactly the same way as the right mitt. It's just that on that very first setup round, you're going to end up putting your stitch marker in a different location. That's going to give your thumb gusset a place to grow that's in the right spot for your left hand. But other than that, it's exactly the same. So, all right, let me just check in. I think I've answered all the questions I've had. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate you guys being here and being active in the chat. That was really awesome to see all of you guys. Really appreciate it. So thank you so much. I hope you make these mitts. I hope you gift them. I hope you love them. Happy knitting, everybody. Bye.